Thank you, Brian. I hope that doesn't mean I'll be too redundant, but you'll probably hear a few things more than once today. First, I just want to put this slide up about who TransCanada is. Most of you probably had never heard of TransCanada previously to this year. If you had, you thought it was a scenic railroad across the Canadian Rockies. And if you've heard about it this year, you think we're at the epicenter of big oil. And in fact, we're neither one. We are a North American energy infrastructure company. As Brian has already pointed out, we have a very diversified portfolio of assets. With our 40,000 miles of pipeline, we're the largest mover of natural gas in North America. With our power plants, as you mentioned, we're already very diversified. We have North America's largest nuclear facility. We provide most of the hydroelectric power in New England. We have, of course, gas plants. We're looking to move into solar. So we have a very wide interest in a lot of things. We also were once interested in the transmission business. A year ago, with this map would have had some dotted lines from Alberta to Oregon, Washington, one from Montana to Nevada, and one from Wyoming to Nevada that would have delivered wind power from those areas into the great load centers on the Pacific coast. But transmission is even tougher than an oil pipeline, if you can believe that. And then we also have this dotted lines up there in Alaska. We are the company that was selected through the Alaska Gas Incentive Act to be the developer of the Alaskan gas pipeline, if it is ever developed. And that's a huge thing. And then you also notice we have assets now in Mexico, gas pipelines. So we are a truly North American company, and that is a lot more than oil. But a few years ago, because we saw obvious parallels between delivering natural gas and delivering oil, TransCanada decided to get into the oil pipeline business. And we already have built one oil pipeline, the original Keystone. And now we are proposing and trying to get permitted the second Keystone, second phase of Keystone that we call XL, though I think Rick had a better slide. He called it Keystone 2, which I wish we had done that people would know this is not something new but an expansion of an existing system. Now, when TransCanada first conceived of Keystone XL about 4 years ago, we thought that this project would be embraced with great enthusiasm by the United States. We really did. We knew that the United States has long been concerned about energy security, that Americans resent that we purchase oil from petro-dictatorships that use those revenues to oppress their own people and to fund anti-American activities. And here with Keystone XL was an opportunity to purchase even more oil from our number one oil supplier, Canada, a loyal ally, a great friend, a freedom-loving democracy that shares our environmental and social values. Then as we actually began to move into the permitting phase of Keystone, the Great Recession hit. And we thought this $7 billion project, which is all privately financed, would be welcomed with open arms because of the number of jobs it will create. Thousands, 20,000 was one estimate of the direct employment from Keystone. And those jobs wouldn't come just along the pipeline route in the 6 states the Keystone would go through. They would also come from a variety of states. Most of the pipe and the steel that will be used in the United States is being manufactured in Arkansas. The pumps are being manufactured in Oregon, and a lot of the fittings are being manufactured in Ohio. So a whole host of states are going to benefit directly from the Keystone XL project. And then there are the tax revenues. At a time when many of you as state legislators are having to make drastic cuts in basic services, here's a project that will pay more than $100 million per year in property taxes alone, plus millions more in sales tax, and the family wage jobs that it will develop will also cause boosts in, hopefully, income tax revenues. And we really thought we'd put the cherry on top of the sundae when we announced our intention to add 2 on-ramps to the pipeline that will carry not only Canadian oil but American oil in through Keystone XL. One of the on-ramps is near Baker, Montana. It is capable of accepting 100,000 barrels a day of oil from the Bakken Formation, which underlies the Dakotas and Montana. We already have contracts for 65,000 barrels of that amount. And the other one in Cushing, Oklahoma, which is one of North America's great oil trading hubs, that will also allow producers in that region to access Keystone and move their product to the Gulf Coast refineries. And then there was the fact that we had, as I said, just developed an oil pipeline, the first Keystone, that was just completed last summer. And during that entire project, there had been no opposition really whatsoever. There was no political opposition to the first Keystone. And it crossed Nebraska and the Ogallala Aquifer as well, by the way. So here we have, over the last year, we've already delivered more than 100 million barrels of oil through Keystone into North America, oil sands oil. And so we saw Keystone XL as simply an expansion of the existing system. Now, it's a big project to be sure. It's 1,700 miles in length, so we knew we would come up, there would be obstacles, bumps along the road. Rick's mentioned a few of those, and I hope you will ask me about the ones that are most concerned to you during our question and answer period. So we knew it was going to be a project that had challenges, but we didn't see it as anything radically different that what had already been done and what is being done across North America in terms of delivering oil from where it resides as for producers and delivering it to where it's used by consumers. So we were genuinely taken aback by the level of passion that Keystone XL has generated, particularly in this past year. It's been quite stunning to us, and frankly, we were caught a bit off guard. I'll admit it right up front. The rhetoric around Keystone, such as the assertion by the former head of NASA that development of Keystone XL represents the tipping point, that's his words, tipping point, that will make climate change irreversible, is completely out of proportion to the impact of this project, pro or con. Public interest now has been generated to the point that this project has undergone probably one of the most thorough reviews of any oil pipeline in the history of the world. The initial Keystone took 24 months of review before we received our presidential permit. That's what we thought Keystone XL would take. We're about to enter our 40th month. We are hopeful to receive that presidential permit before the end of the year. There's still some more process left to go. Because of the public pressure that was received, the Department of State, which is the agency that oversees the presidential permit because it is a cross-border project, took the unusual step of issuing a supplemental draft environmental impact statement this spring. And the public comment during the supplemental draft environmental impact statement numbered 265,000 comments, pro and con. Now, we have just gone through another public comment period on Keystone XL called the National Interest Determination, which is exactly as it sounds. It's the last sort of public input before state makes its decision, in which Americans are free to offer their opinion on whether the pipeline is or is not in the national interest. I don't have the final figures on how many people have commented, but we were expecting more than 500,000 comments, and it may approach 1 million. And this is above and beyond the some 1,000 comments that were made in person during the 9 public hearings the Department of State held in late September and early October in the 6 directly impacted states plus Washington, D.C. And crowds at that point ranged from a few hundred in places like South Dakota and Montana to a couple of thousand in Nebraska. And it's all made for some very politically strange bedfellows. You heard Governor Schweitzer, the CSG president, strongly endorse Keystone XL today. He's a Democrat, as are the 2 senators from Montana, both Democrats. They strongly endorse this project, and yet the Republican governor of Nebraska and the state's senior Republican senator, Mike Johans, oppose the project, or at least the current routing of the project. Now, so what's happened here? What is going on that people would get this excited about an oil pipeline? In moments of candor, including a debate we had in San Francisco about a month ago with Carl Pope, the chairman of the Sierra Club, and an interview I heard with Bill McKibben on the PBS NewsHour, in moments of candor, they will acknowledge, and Bill McKibben is the man who organized all the protests at the White House that led to about 1,000 arrests of celebrities like Daryl Hannah and people like that. They have acknowledged that really Keystone XL is the proxy for them to have a much larger debate over the fate of oil and the place of oil in our society. The environmental community has been disappointed that the Obama administration has not advanced some of their key interests, such as implementing a carbon cap and trade system. And so they have now declared Keystone XL the litmus test for the president and anyone else who they consider supporters of their commitment to the environment. Now, a serious debate on climate change and the role of oil in our economy and our society would be, and what alternatives exist to that, would be welcome, necessary, and long overdue. But it is unfortunate and ironic that Keystone XL has become the focal point for that debate, because TransCanada believes that Keystone and Keystone XL represents an improvement in the way oil is delivered into the United States, and including in ways that benefit the environment, not just a trade-off, but actually benefit the environment. Because ultimately, if the debate over Keystone XL is a debate over the future of oil, it's going to be a very sterile, inconclusive, and unfulfilling debate, because that is not what is at stake here. Stopping Keystone will not reduce or end our dependence on oil, foreign or domestic. Ending Keystone will not provide an impetus to Americans to conserve oil, and it will not stop the development of the oil sands. The issues around Keystone come down to 2 pretty basic questions. Given that I think we acknowledge, even if we banned the internal combustion engine tomorrow, which nobody is anticipating, I think and given that, as Murray mentioned, there are hundreds of millions of cars on the roads in America today, not to mention all the other things that petroleum is used for in our society, I think we can all agree that we will continue to be using petroleum in some quantity over the next several decades. And so the question that Keystone should be asking is, so from whom will the United States purchase that oil, and to whom will the Canadians sell their oil? Now, without any real evidence to substantiate the claim, opponents of Keystone have now raised the issue that if KXL is built, then all the oil that's transported through KXL will ultimately be exported to China. This is false. The vast majority of the oil transported on Keystone will be refined, sold, and used in the United States. Less than 10% of the refined products from this oil will be exported overseas, which is exactly the same proportion of refined product that is exported from Gulf Coast refineries today. Opponents have it exactly backwards. If Keystone XL is not built, then it is almost certain that the oil sands oil will go to China. As already been mentioned, there are alternatives on the drawing board already to develop pipelines moving west to the Pacific Ocean from the oil sands if Keystone XL is blocked. Now, certainly there is some local opposition to the oil sands in Canada. That is absolutely true. But I would say our TransCanada's judgment is that the oil sands represents far too great an economic opportunity, measured in the trillions of dollars, for Canada to walk away from developing that resource. Canada is a great ally. It's a sovereign nation, and it will develop its resources as it sees fit, just as we would brook no interference from other nations in how we develop our resources here in the USA. It is important to recognize that having the oil sands sent to China, a nation that does not have the stringent environmental regulatory regime present in the United States and Canada, is troubling for the environment, is far more troubling for the environment than Keystone in two different ways. First, after being piped across Western Canada, the oil would be delivered to China by tankers halfway across the globe across a stormy and unpredictable Pacific Ocean. Ocean-going tankers are far more risky means of delivering oil than pipelines. 8 of the 10 largest oil spills in world history have been due to tanker accidents, and that doesn't even include the Exxon Valdez accident in 1989. Now, pipelines are by no means immune to accidents, which we discovered in Montana this year and in Michigan last year. But pipelines are exponentially safer than transporting oil by tanker or rail car or truck, and further, the spill volumes are smaller and more easily contained and cleaned up than ocean-based spills. The second way that blocking Keystone is bad for the environment is that one of the rationales for Keystone XL is that Canadian oil will displace heavy crude already imported from such locales as Venezuela, Nigeria, and the Middle East. We estimate that Keystone will negate the need for 200 tankers a year coming into the Gulf Coast from overseas. But if Keystone is blocked, those 200 tankers will still come, while an additional 200 tankers or more per year will now be needed to ship that oil to China. This crude oil shuffle, as we call it, will, in our estimation, actually increase global greenhouse gas emissions by somewhere between 7 million and 19 million metric tons per year. So without Keystone, we will continue to import large amounts of heavy crude from places like Venezuela, Nigeria, and the Middle East. That won't create jobs in America, won't pay taxes in America, and it won't improve the environment. It will justify the continued expenditure of defense dollars to ensure that the flow of oil from those countries is ever interrupted. We will have the military capability to restore that flow. Canadian oil, on the other hand, as Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer has termed it, is conflict-free oil. In other words, stopping Keystone will not save the environment, but it will preserve the status quo. And I think the status quo is what we would all like to get away from in the energy business. Thank you.